Okay, thank you.
Okay, so welcome everyone to the Northeastern Women in Physics Alumni panel. I am Toyoko Orimoto, an associate professor of physics at Northeastern and informal advisor to the Northeastern Women in Physics group. So I think I know at least, I know personally at least half of you, which is really, really great. Thank you so much for joining. I would like to introduce Dr. Tanvi Wamorkar, who is a recent Northeastern PhD alum. Very recent, she got her PhD in August of this year, and she's soon to be a postdoc at Argonne National Laboratory, and she will be our moderator for this evening. So I'm going to pass it over to you, Tombi.
Hi, Toyoko. Thank you so much. I'm just going to okay. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining our panel. And a big thank you to all our panelists today. I think we have a wonderful group of panelists. So I think without further ado, it would be really nice if the panelists can introduce themselves. So we can start with Michelle.
Hi, everybody. I'm Michelle Jamer. So I was a PhD student at Northeastern University from 2011 to 2015. I worked with Don Hyman in the physics department. And whenever I was at Northeastern, I studied Hoistlers with Don Hyman, and that has always been now my research study through now. So essentially fell in love with learning about intermetallics and 3D electron coupling. And then I went on to get my postdoc, I did my postdoc at the NIST Center for Neutron Research. I was an NRC postdoctoral researcher there. And then I became an assistant professor at the United States Naval Academy, where I run my Hoistler and Magnetic Materials Laboratory. And I am the faculty advisor of the Society of Physics students, and I run the Women in Physics group there at United States Naval Academy. So thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Hi, Sarita, can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Sarita Lewis. I just recently graduated Northeastern with my master's. Previously graduated in 2019 with my bachelor's in applied physics, so double Husky. I completed around 4 co-ops during my time at Northeastern, 3 during my undergraduate and 1 in my graduate degree. And I sort of bounced all over from aerospace and defense through academic research, renewable energy, and I ended up in product development. So I sort of did a taste of everything. And I'm now an associate product manager at Rocketbook, making reusable office supplies and focusing on the product development lifecycle from ideation up through supply chain.
Thank you, Sarita. Let's move on to Joyce.
Hello, everyone. I'm Joyce. I attended Northeastern University for a PhD program from 2013 to 2018. And I worked in Professor Paul Whitford's group, focusing on computational biophysics. My research mostly focused on how do you actually build models to simulate ribosomes, and how do you perform large-scale simulations and unveil the dynamics of other RNAs and proteins within a ribosome. After my PhD, I directly entered a data science field. I have been working in Wayfair. Wayfair is an e-commerce company where we sell a lot of home goods. My role in Wayfair right now is a senior manager of data science, which is more managerial role, where I oversee machine learning product building to enable automation across the organization. So I look forward to talk to everyone about my experience. Why do I choose data science? How working in data science look like?
Thank you, Joyce. And last but not the least, we have Kelsey with us.
Hi, everybody. I'm Kelsey Yee. I went to Northeastern as an undergraduate student. So I started in 2014 and I ended in 2018. During there, I did a lot of cool things. I loved my time at Northeastern. I had 2 co-ops. The first one was at the Worldwide Center of Mathematics. You might know them as the people who make literally all the textbooks. It's great. I also worked at CERN. My senior year, which was also fantastic, and I loved it, and it really shaped the person who I am today in a lot of ways. And I also worked in the nanophysics lab. But after I graduated, I didn't go right into a PhD program. I actually took 3 whole years of time away from academia, and it definitely helped me figure out what I really wanted in life, which was in the end to be in academia again. And now I'm a physics PhD student at MIT. So in industry, I was a laser engineer, so build, design, tests, typically fiber lasers. And now I am back in particle physics, which I decided was my favorite thing of all the different things that I tried. And I am working under Professor Kirsten Perez. She's really outstanding. She's currently trying to put a detector on a balloon, fly the balloon in Antarctica, and look for low energy antiparticles, specifically antideuteron and antihelium, which is a very, very cool, exciting project with a lot of promise, which is why I really wanted to be part of it. So that's where I am right now. I'm looking forward to talking about the pros and cons of trying lots of different things. Looking forward to talking about industry and academia and, you know, my journey, and hopefully help you all make informed decisions about the various journeys you will be on. So thanks.
Thank you so much. And thanks again to the panel for joining us today. I'm sorry. Okay, so now moving forward, what we have done is that we have gathered some questions that we have organized into various themes that center around pursuing a career in industry, questions related to a career in academia, etc. So what I'll do is we'll touch upon all of those themes a little bit at first, and then we'll open up the floor to questions from our audience members. So feel free to post your questions in the chat or raise your hand using the feature in Zoom. Okay, so let's just get started. So to get started, I'd love to kick off our discussion by directing a question towards all of our panelists at first. So because our audience consists of students who are pursuing undergraduate as well as graduate degrees, I would like to ask the panelists, how do you go about finding what is a good career fit for yourself? Because as we know, when you get a degree in physics, there are many, many avenues that are open to you. So how do you decide for yourself and identify what would be a good fit for you?
I think I can get started on this question. So during my PhD years, I think my last 2 years in PhD, I started to think about, okay, what I want to do next. Do I want to do a postdoc? Do I want to go into industry? So I started the searching of what I want to do next, I think 2 years before I'm going to graduate, and tried a lot of different things, analyzing my strength, weakness, my personality. In the end, I narrowed down to, okay, I have many years of training in quantitative field, so I definitely don't want to lose out that advantage that I have for all those physics training that I gained. And I'm also a very extroverted person who likes to talk to people all the time, doesn't really enjoy like sit alone and reading research paper all day. So I decided, okay, academia is probably not a good fit for my personality and what I enjoy to do. So I tried 3 different fields that I think might be tied with physics background. One is management consulting. Second is finance. Third is tech field. And each of the areas, I did different things. From consulting, I actually go into consulting groups and apply for a job, talk to people who work in that area and see if my background is really fitting the appetite of the market. Finance, I tried CFA and attended courses and see if I actually like all those finance stuff. Data science, I tried to do projects in there and talk to people who already work in the field and try out applying for jobs, see if that's actually a good fit for my background. In the end, I landed in data science, which I think is a good choice both by me and by the market. In this field, people are looking for people who have PhD training, who has a lot of independent research experience, and also has a good good command of the communication skill. So this is my journey, how what I explored and how I landed where I am.
I guess I can chime. Oh, sorry.
Oh, that's great. Go ahead, Kelsey.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, that was a great answer. I can chime in as well because I've also tried a lot of different things, just like Joyce. So when finding a career path that's right for you, always be checking in with yourself to see if you're happy with where you seem like you're going. So in academia, I knew that I wanted to take at least one gap year. I wanted to try something different. And I thought it was important to balance, dreams, but also with practicality, and working in engineering for a while and making, an engineer salary. That was a very financially practical thing to do. Even though I knew I didn't want to do it for too long. So I did that and it felt right for the first year. It felt okay for the second year. And by the third year, I was writing my applications to grad school and kind of starting to go out because it didn't feel right anymore. It felt like I would hit a ceiling in my job if I didn't change or if I didn't go to grad school. And I'd always known that I wanted to go to grad school. And at that time I was 25 and I was kind of ready to at least start the process of being in grad school until I had to consider children in the future and things like that. And I needed to set myself up to be able to be ready for that. And that was really important to me. So always listen to yourself, always consider many options, and always make an informed decision. So before you jump into anything, always do your research and make sure you're making the right choice. And always remember that you can change your mind at any point. So if you don't like what you're doing, you can always change your mind. Fortunately, I found myself at MIT as a PhD student and I love it. And I don't think I'll change my mind on this. I think it's a great fit for me in a lot of ways. So yeah.
I can chime in next. So I guess adding to the overall theme of trial and error, truly try as many things as you can. Especially with Northeastern's co-op program, you can truly just try out for 6 months, anything that you're interested in at all. And I highly recommend, beyond an internship or a co-op, reaching out to people in various fields and asking to shadow them for a day or asking for informational interviews. Those are so invaluable, just to talk to people who have been in a field for a while that maybe you're just vaguely considering, just to understand what their day-to-day is like. If you're not able to obtain a position for a period of time, to experience it for yourself. And then for me as well, I think it was just interesting just talking to my peers and learning what other people were going into, and learning that way of maybe someone else is pursuing a direction that you hadn't even thought of or even considered, and just keeping a tab on your peers and what directions they're going in, because you never know, you can make a switch one day, and then maintaining that contact is incredibly important.
Yeah, and I don't really have too much trial and error, unfortunately, but one thing that I have really found that really helped me was, like, I found a research field that I loved. I knew I wanted to stay in it. And then I tried during my postdoc, I was actually working with neutrons all the time and using neutrons in order to study magnets. And I feel like that was my big crazy trial in comparison. I'm not switching between industry or academia, but I found out that working at a government lab, I thought it was going to be awesome. I thought it was going to rock my socks off. And I was like, no, this is not for me. Like, basically it was like year 3, I was like, I need to start applying for faculty positions and really hope for the best, because as you know, that's also very competitive, but it's one of those things that you have to try, and you have to look at that job application and say that, okay, I might only check off 5 out of 7 boxes. And especially as women, we tend to under apply to jobs that we don't feel that we're qualified for. So even though you don't necessarily meet all the expectations in terms of, okay, well, I probably would have been like, oh, I don't think that the United States Naval Academy really wants my kind of flavor of research, but I still applied, and I checked out all the boxes except for like the research field that they were looking for, and it worked out. So always try to apply.
So it seems like the common denominator amongst all your responses is that you should keep checking in with yourself and then also try to identify what your peers are doing. So do you guys think it's important to have a mentor that you can look up to for guidance? Yeah, what are your thoughts on that? Trying to identify a mentor who can help you apply for jobs and give you general career advice. Would perhaps Sarita would like to chime in first?
Sure. So I think I found mentorship actually after I graduated, not so much during my school years. I found a lot of peers around me, like through Women in Physics, and also just meeting women within the engineering school, which is pretty closely tied to the physics department too. And I think I found a really good community in that sense. But because I think specifically myself, I was exploring too many different fields, it was hard to nail down one mentor during my academic years. But after college, I now have a wonderful mentor at my company, and I think having someone to help you sort of guide your career and just talk about next steps is definitely invaluable. And trying to find that person for yourself should definitely be a priority.
Maybe Kelsey or Joyce or Michelle would like to give their thoughts on this. How do you really, when you're a student, how do you go about identifying somebody who can be your mentor?
Yeah, good question, because now I'm reflecting on how I ended up doing that. So Toyoko Orimoto, I'm gonna embarrass you right now. She's a fantastic mentor. She's an amazing person. She's a wonderful professor. I am so glad I got to work for her. I found Toyoko definitely through the CERN co-op, and it made me regret not joining SPS earlier, because I do think I would have been connected to Toyoko earlier if I did that. So I guess from that, I guess go to clubs, go to SPS if you haven't already. It's great. I went too late, but it can be your supervisor. That's one method of finding a mentor. You also need to click with them, and they also need to be someone who you can trust. So I've had more than one supervisor because I've done more than one co-op. And I also had research with Nathan Israeloff, and I think he was also a mentor in a way, but not quite in the same way as Toyoko. So Toyoko, I'll message her if I want. I messaged her the first thing when I thought of applying to grad schools. It was Toyoko. And it wasn't my supervisor at my job. It wasn't my supervisor at my first co-op. It's people who you think you can develop a level of trust with, and it's the same for finding an academic advisor in grad school. You really need to believe in that person and have a good relationship with them, and just kind of see you when you work with people, you get a feel for how they operate, and that should match the way you operate, and you'll know it when you get there. If it clicks, it clicks. And that's kind of how I know that Toyoko is my mentor, I guess. And also it's good to find mentors, not just in just like what Sarita said, not just in your advisors, but also in your peers. So just kind of make sure you're well connected to a lot of different people, and make sure you have a good support system. And also you may find yourself supporting other people too, and that's a good thing. As you develop in your career, you might take an intern or something like that. I did that in the end of my job. And just as you've had good mentors, you also want to be a good mentor to other people.
I can talk about my experience. So I'm a big fan of not anchoring yourself like you have to find you're female and you have to find a female mentor. I would say my PhD advisor, who is male and is super supportive and who I look up to, where I did learn a lot from him in terms of how to do independent research, how to transfer all those skills during applying or looking for the field that I'm looking for. Same when I enter into the industry where tech is heavily male oriented, like you will see a room of male who on the leadership board. And I think there's opportunity that you can still form that mentor kind of relationship with a senior person in the company who you can look up to. building that trust. Don't frame yourself, hey, I'm a female, so I feel more comfortable, I just look for a female mentor, but open the door for all the people who are supportive around you.
And going off of that, like my main mentor in my life is my PhD advisor, Don Hyman, who is super supportive, super great. Like anytime anything good happens, like he's definitely one of the first people that I call, like definitely a big fan. But I also think it is important if you are female to have that mentorship as well from female. So you don't have to have just one mentor either. And you can always branch out, and I know I can talk to Dawn about everything, but I can also talk to my postdoc advisor if I ever have like an interpersonal issue come up at work and I want to get her take on it. And so this way, it's always nice to have someone that's been there, especially as women in physics are not necessarily the most prevalent type of people, just because there still is that gap. So it is good to find a female that is strong and that you look up to and will really help you navigate your career a little bit, because she's probably been there. So
okay. Yeah, that's great advice. And I think we realize now that it's really important to just find a mentor who is supportive of you and who can sort of guide you at various stages in your career. So what I'd like to do now is sort of venture into questions about jobs in the industry. So I'd like to direct a few questions towards Joyce and Sarita first, because they're involved, their work involves working in the industry. So oftentimes students that are pursuing degrees in physics, be it undergrad, master's or PhD, think that academia might be one of the only few options for them. So how do you advise that they kind of branch out and try to identify the various kind of opportunities that are available to them?
Yeah, I can touch on this first. So I think physics, more than anything else, is problem solving, and it gives you a mindset and a way to go about solving problems. And I think once you think of it that way, you can then look at the world and ask yourself, what problems need to be solved? And then from there, what industries have those problems that really interest me? So that's sort of the mindset that I went through in college, of what problems do I want to tackle? How can I go about solving them? And then applying the knowledge that I learned and how to problem solve and how to go about looking at the world in a different sort of way that, non-physics or non-STEM students don't always see. And there are so many problems out there. There are so many industries that you can go into. To give an example that's very specific, I actually originally wanted to go into astrophysics. And I know a bunch of astrophysicists who have, switched from academia and actually gone into quantitative finance research, and they build quants to predict the stock market changes. So they're taking that knowledge that they've learned before of building models with large sets of data and just applying it to a different problem. You can take those skills that you've developed and just take away all of the context and then see where else they fit.
So as Sarita said, there's a lot of opportunities, all kinds of industry. The skill set is all transferable. You have opportunity to enter any possible field that if you wish to. But look back in the days when I was applying for a job, actually my whole world has been academia. I'm not so aware of what are all the industry out there. So what I do is, I would say, mainly three things. One thing is from all your alumni to see who in your lab, where did they go, or all the friends who have similar background, where did they go, what kind of field did they choose. So I will be researching and talking to them to understand, okay, why do you choose to go to that field, what's interesting about it. Second is there are many pre-COVID time, there are many local networks. You can just find it on Meetup, a lot of different social network ways you can join the groups and participate and talk to people, meet random people from different backgrounds, and get understanding for what are those backgrounds, what are those fields. The last way is really like, it's one thing that you want to go into field, it's another thing that you're actually going to get a job in that field. So market also has its own appetite, like for this kind of background, what kind of job that you apply to and people actually reply. So what I did when I'm looking for a job, I actually applied for many different kind of jobs, and I'll see like who returned my call and who actually is interested. And I get a clearer, every single week that I apply, I get a much clearer understanding of, okay, where is my position in this job market?
Right, and I think for that, I think it would be really good if you're able to sort of start preparation for all this early. So it's better to start sooner rather than later. So just expanding that on a little bit, let's say once you're able to identify that you want to go into industry, what do you think are the various ways in which you can sort of gear your profile to be suited towards industry? Like what are the steps that students can take so that their qualifications match up with what is being required in industry jobs?
I think I can go first on this one. I'm talking specifically in data science field. Back in the days, like my research is completely different from what I'm doing right now. I think first step that I look up is do my research online. For data science jobs, what kind of portfolio, like what kind of skill set people are looking for? What kind of key or fundamental knowledge that I have to have in order to pass the interview? And that's my first step by just looking up online. There are so many blog posts for a specific industry, specific field you're looking for. And then find the common areas and prepare and study for that. Second step is to targeted networking, looking for local like information sessions, meetups for data science field, and talk to people who already worked in there and ask about what they do every day. What are the things that they're looking for from a candidate? And then you have a more targeted preparation in your CV, in your knowledge preparation period. However, once I audit that, I still find that most of my application got rejected because my CV is actually not really tailored. I wrote those by myself, which I'm not a native speaker. My documentation skill is not so great. So I have to go iteration every single time I send out a version 1 CV, I got all rejected. I do a revision and ask people to take my resume. I find, okay, I got 1 call return. And then I say, okay, I do iterations of that until I hit the sweet spot. Most of like 50% of what I applied, I'll get something feedback. So in this way, I can iteratively keep testing out by trying, get your feet dirty.
I think adding on to that, for items that you can do while you're in school to add on to your CV or your resume, I think physics by itself looks a little intimidating. So I added like a handful of minors during my undergraduate years that were, totally different, going into environmental science and sustainable business practices, and trying to diversify my education a little bit beyond my direct degree. Joining student groups outside of physics that have to do with your passions, showing that you're going out of your way to spend time with people who have similar interests, and following your passions to lead you into a specific industry are really, really helpful. If there are any competitions or case shows or anything like that that you can participate in, definitely always attend, showing that you're popping up on registration, starting to build your network within different industries. You can always add things to your LinkedIn. So I tend to list my LinkedIn at the top of my resume and then have additional information there, since it's hard to fit things beyond a 1 page. Yeah. Yeah,
perhaps this is also where it's helpful if you have a a mentor or a group of trusted peers that you can go to for advice when it comes to applying for jobs and preparing materials for interviews, for example. So oftentimes I've seen and heard amongst my peers that when people with a physics degree try to apply for industry jobs, especially if their CVs are not tailored towards an industry job, they might appear to be overqualified for that particular job. So are there any ways in which one can plan for this situation? I know, Sarita, you already touched a little bit upon this when you mentioned that people can make use of co-op opportunities to sort of branch out to other subfields during their degree. But if there are other thoughts about how to sort of not be considered overqualified for an industry job.
Yeah, I think I can just continue on my train of thought with the resume. For me, including the minors and sort of highlighting that information as well as your main degree, I think the way that you phrase things is incredibly important. So when you are switching over to more of an industry focused job position, you know, sort of just the resume 101 of looking at the job description, looking at sort of what are the qualities that they're looking for, what sorts of problems will you be solving when you're in that position, and then taking your experience in those bullet points from your past positions and restructuring it to sort of match that job description a little bit more. So like for my case, I have a few publications, and I actually ended up only keeping my top publication on my resume and adding a note to visit my LinkedIn for additional publications, and then adding more bullet points to my previous co-op positions and highlighting those a little bit more. So sort of reprioritizing the information that you have on there.
I definitely echo with what Sarita is saying. I think it doesn't matter that much what of your major it is. What matters more is if you can show that you can do the job. I am currently a hiring manager where I interview a lot of candidates, and I hire actually a lot of background. Like my data science is very quantitative field. However, I hire a lot of people who are from psychology background, educational background. So what is the major doesn't really matter that much. What matters is what you did to prepare for this interview. What is your past experience that showcase you can do the job and you have passion in this field. So I would say not to be too framed on what you are doing right now, but more forward looking, what you want to do and what you can do to achieve that goal.
Okay. So now I'd like to switch gears a little bit and direct a few questions towards Michelle and Kelsey so that we can talk about things related to academia. So I'm just posing this question to both Michelle and Kelsey. So how do you pursue research opportunities during your undergrad that you think will be helpful for when it comes to applying to grad school positions? And how do you approach professors for such opportunities? Because I know it can be intimidating sometimes to do that.
Sure. Can I go first, I guess? So yeah, it is kind of intimidating, but you miss 100%. I know it's cheesy. You miss 100% of the shots that you don't take, right? And there is literally no penalty to emailing every professor you ever had and asking them for research opportunities. So I know people who have done that. They get rejected sometimes, and oftentimes they were accepted, and it's okay. Rejection hurts, but just keep at it, and you'll get something. So for me, my first research job was with in the Israel lab, and he was great, and I really like him. It was a very unique lab though, and he almost. I don't think there was a single time when he said no to somebody who wanted to do research. It was a very undergraduate driven lab. He didn't have a PhD student. He didn't have any postdocs. And that was really a good experience, but a very different experience than I think what some other people may have. And the way I got that position was by taking his modern physics class and then just showing up after his class and saying, hey, I want to do research. I'll do any research. whatever you have, just let me have it. And that worked out for the best. And it was a nanophysics project. And that was something that at first I didn't really get it. I mean, I was learning how to do research, but as I developed, I took my first co-op, and it wasn't in research, but when I came back, I was so much more motivated. I kind of understood how to work in a lab, just organized and efficient. And then I got a little better at research, and then I worked at CERN, and I came back and I was even better at research. And then I finally did more research for him over the summer when I could finally dedicate more than just a few hours here and there. And that turned into a talk that I gave at APS 2019 that I'm really proud of, honestly. And that happened because, I had this opportunity to do this because I kind of pushed myself to be a little more extroverted, even though I'm not typically always like that. But if you want something, you do have to try to get it. You do have to put in the effort and recover from failure, and just, ask professors if you can do research for them. And one thing that I think I did not take into account that I should have was you can shop around a little bit. So I didn't know much about his lab. I didn't know he didn't have PhD students. I didn't know he had postdocs. And it's a very different experience if you're an undergrad in a lab with PhD students and postdocs. So think about what you want. If you want a lot of structure, then you probably want to join a lab with a pretty good system of professor, postdoc, PhD student. If you want a little more agency, or maybe a lot of agency over your project, then maybe you do want to join a lab like Israel's lab. But again, make an informed decision. Find people who are working for the professor at the time. You can talk to PhD students, talk to people, definitely talk to professors. But if you look, I bet you'll find something, I guess, is my advice.
I agree with that statement, because like whenever I was an undergrad, I knew I wanted to do research. I didn't know where to start. I basically hung out after like physics 2 one day, and I was like, can you tell me a little bit about what research you do? And then wound up like talking to him, and then did a lab tour. And so essentially, I think I was even too shy, which is kind of funny, because if you actually know me, I'm never shy about anything. I think I was a little even too shy to say like, oh, can I work in your lab? I definitely was like too shy to ask that. So if it doesn't feel natural for you to like blast emails out, definitely like just talk to professors or send an email saying like, hey, I'm interested in maybe like looking at doing a research opportunity. Would you be willing to talk with me? Rather than doing the blast email, because you also, like Kelsey said, you do have agency here. You don't necessarily have to go with the first professor that responds yes, because at the end of the day, let's just say you don't like chemistry, well, then you probably don't want to be working in a lab where you're going to be needing to use principles of stoichiometry in order to make samples. That's probably a no-go. Maybe you want to do more coding. Well, then you might want to find a different professor for that as well. And I think that's one of the best things that you can do, because you're almost brand new in research. So you have the opportunity to shop around, figure out what your true interests are. And obviously it also has to be a good personality fit, because if you're working with a professor and they say like, oh, I don't really like working with undergraduates, well, you should take that as a hint to say like, oh, maybe I should work with someone that would really want to support me.
Sorry, I was muted there. Michelle, perhaps I can expand on that further and ask you, what do you think are the various kind of options that one can explore when one wants to stay in academia? Like, I know that there are universities that are more geared towards teaching, universities that are more geared towards research. So if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, so you also have an option whenever you're a graduate student to start thinking about, okay, well, if you want to go the academic route, what kind of academic route do I want to take? So I went to a national lab, which is kind of like a sweet spot in between industry and academia, where essentially you're not going to be necessarily, there's some people that do apply for grants every single year, but you also don't have a teaching load. And sometimes you don't have real control over the problems that you study. You're more so given a technique. I was on the technique side, where essentially I was given, this is the technique that you are going to specialize in. You can do whatever you want within that technique, and you need to like this technique. And so some people really love that kind of structure where they can use basically the same principle over and over again to study the same thing, or different things rather than the same thing. So national labs are great, especially if you want to have a little bit of, you want to have some ideas, you want to be able to integrate your research into the overall framework. And working at a national lab is a really nice lifestyle, and it works out very well for a lot of people. I chose not to stay in the government lifestyle for a variety of reasons. One of them was that I didn't really like working with neutrons every single day, just because it's the same technique over and over again. So you get really used to the data reduction. And what I found was if I was interested in the system and it didn't have the applications for my technique, I couldn't actually study that system. And so that is one of the reasons why I decided to go into academia, where I have a little bit more academic freedom, but then you also have the pressure to get your own funding. I'm still in the national umbrella, so my retirement benefits are really good. So if you're like, I don't really know what I want to do, I want to have some academic freedom, definitely try to find an institution like the Naval Academy, just because you're mostly supported. You just have to find a couple months of funding. It's okay if you don't find funding. You can always work out a deal with ONR at the end of the day, it seems like, in physics. So it's a good place to get your bearings, but it is more teaching focused. So I teach 2 undergraduate classes per semester. They're normally the same class. I'm only teaching undergraduates because I'm at an undergraduate only institution. And so there's pros and cons to that. You're never going to have a PhD student, and that's okay, but I do have a postdoc. So there's pluses and minuses to everything that you do. The great thing is that when I work with undergraduate students, they're just amazing, because they're so new to physics, and they have so much excitement that I love working with that every single day. But I don't know how I would do it at a university where there's both postdocs and PhD students, but I imagine it's a little bit different, because then you have to get into managing someone else's basically life and their trajectory if you are their PhD advisor. But hopefully I didn't stray too much from the question, but essentially, yeah, there's many different options when you go into the academic side of things. And there's even changes within the university, and the university culture is also very dependent, and you have to decide on if you want to really be primarily undergraduate, or you want to move on and have graduate students, if you want to be less teaching, more teaching. There's all these different areas.
Thank you, Michelle. Perhaps Kelsey, you can give us your perspective, since you transitioned into industry for a while before you joined a PhD program.
Yeah, I also wanted to echo, so if you're shy about asking a research professor for research, just to echo what Michelle said, like we love undergraduate students. I think everybody loves undergraduate students. When I was an undergrad student doing research, I always felt like I was a little too, like, maybe people were very nice to me, and I felt like I hadn't really earned it yet, because I hadn't really learned things to contribute, and I felt like it took me so much longer to do things. But no, it's great to have undergrads in your lab. It means you're supporting new talent. It means you're fostering the new generation of scientists. It's a privilege, honestly. So don't be shy about asking, because people will love to have you. So sorry, Tombi, can you repeat the question? I just wanted to echo that one thing.
No worries. So basically, I just wanted to discuss what are the various options that people can explore within academia.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, yes, that's a good question. So if you want to stay in academia, you are going to limit yourself a little bit. So obviously you're not doing industry work. So yes, you are limited in some ways, but you probably will have a lot of different professors to choose from and a lot of different projects that you could potentially explore, because a physics degree in physics, it's so broad. So you could go into condensed matter if you like that. You can go into AMO if you like that. You can go into particle physics if you like that. I highly encourage it. Things like that. So if you're really dedicated to physics, then yeah, academia could be for you. This life could be for you. It's great, in my opinion. If you're willing to put in the effort, a PhD could be the right choice for you. And that is a decision that you kind of have to make on your own, based on your needs. I think, again, making an informed decision is important. So if academia is for you, you might be looking at 60, 70, 80-hour weeks working on pure science. And that's your life. And you're not going to have a lot of free time, but that could be the right choice for you. And it could be awesome. You might be one of those people. But also, before you make that decision, know what you're getting into. If you get a PhD, so the further you go into academia, it's not impossible to get out, but you are kind of, just know what you're getting into. If you get a PhD, you do become overqualified for some jobs. That's kind of how it is. So before you finish your PhD with your doctorate, just check in with yourself, make sure you're on the right track, you like where you're going. And there's a lot of time to figure that out as you're getting your PhD. And it's the same with undergraduate getting a major. You are kind of getting very specific. I'm doing physics, and yes, I can do engineering. Yes, I can do physics, obviously, laser engineering, some optical engineering, but mainly, yes, this is my bubble here, and it's very far away from something like cell biology. That's probably not something I'm going to go into anymore. Definitely, for a number of reasons. But just I'd be sugarcoating it too much to say, yes, you can change as you please, but also it is possible to change to some extent. I know people who graduated with LHC, doctorate degrees, who went into dark matter searches, or direct dark matter searches that were separate from the LHC. So changing fields is definitely possible, but at the moment I'm with physics. I love physics. I know this is what I want to do, so that's what I'm doing. So before you choose your major, think about what you want. Before you choose your PhD program, think about what you want. There is time to learn, and there's always time to change if you need to, but try to, before you commit to something, try to know what you're getting into, I guess. And yeah, and as an undergrad going into PhD programs, you have a lot of choices within your field. Don't feel like you need to do CERN just because you did, say, CERN in undergrad. You could do nanophysics if you want. It's just the program that you're meant to get into, you'll get into, don't worry. Things will work out, and try to keep an eye on how you feel and what you're interested in, I guess.
Yeah. In the same vein, I wanted to ask you, since you had the experience of working at Lincoln Labs, which is, I'm just guessing, sort of a hybrid between academia and your industry, what do you think are like the pros and cons of taking a gap year before applying to grad school? What has your experience been?
Really, really good question. I can only speak from my own experience, but I highly encourage taking a gap year for grad school. Obviously, I can't say what happens if you don't, but I think it was a really good decision for me. So pros and cons, obviously pro, if you take a gap year and you work for that year, you get to take a break from academia and kind of see what it's like to be in industry and whether or not you like that, because it is very, very plausible to say, hey, I'm going to take a gap year and then have that gap year last until the end of your life. You might not go back to academia, and that's totally okay if that's the right decision for you. It's a financially intelligent decision. There are cons to it as well. I knew when I went to Lincoln Lab that I did want to come back to academia eventually, and that time did come for me, and I'm really glad that it did. I am academically a little bit rusty, and it does show, and I do feel it when I try to do problem sets, and it's hard. I'm working really hard to get back up with my peers, but it's definitely a process. I think taking 1 or 2 gap years instead of 3 probably would have set myself up a little bit better for my current position. I still don't regret it, and I still think it was the right decision. But just keep that in mind if you want to go back into academia. I think waiting 5 years would have been a bit too long for me. But maybe that would be right for you. Only you can kind of decide that. But yeah, pros, your industry experience is going to help you do research. I just learning how to do a 9-to-5 is really important, and that's something that you do at Northeastern as an undergraduate student if you're doing co-ops. But if it's your first time doing full-time, not classes, that might be kind of jarring for someone who hasn't done that before. But yes, there are some cons to it as well. I'm older than all my other cohort students, and they're very fresh off of doing classes, and it really shows. They know their E&M, they know their classical mechanics and things like that. And I'm learning the lingo and the vocab again. So just, yeah, pros and cons, but definitely did enjoy Lincoln Laboratory. If you want to try, again, that boundary of industry and academia, you could go to a national lab. Lincoln Labs was pretty cool. We didn't publish a lot, but we did have some patents. I did get to do some engineering. There was some cool science, but I did think that academia was the right choice for me. But I wouldn't have known if I didn't try.
Okay, so perhaps before we open up the floor to questions, the panelists, if they would like to offer our audience a piece of advice, that would be really great. Maybe we can start with Sarita first.
Sure. I think one of the biggest pieces of advice that I wish I had learned sooner in my academic career is separating out your hobbies and passions from actual career interests. I think they can be very different. My example is astrophysics. I originally wanted to go into that field before I learned that this is really just an interest that I had on the side, and it's not something that I wanted to dedicate my entire life to. And just sort of thinking through those thoughts of, what are you interested in, but then would you actually be interested in pursuing a career in that field? I think they can be very different sometimes. And it doesn't mean giving up one or the other. It just means reprioritizing how you want to approach each of those passions.
Yeah, that's a great way to look at it, and a very important thing to keep in mind. Joyce, would you like to go next?
Yeah, so I've been thinking about, look back on my PhD years, what I feel like really happy and really worthwhile, the effort that I put is the time that I'm starting to do the searching for what I want to do, for the next steps. Initially, I also was feeling a little bit stuck, like I actually don't know where to start. But once started to look up online, like for different fields, for different groups that you can attend, I really gain a lot of a different perspective of view of how people are thinking about things and what life outside of physics research look like. I think that period of time really, till today, I still feel I treasure those days where really life is really diverse. Diverse is now life is a lot about work in the specific field. Back in the day in PhD, life is all about physics. But during those transition years, I really enjoyed it. I would encourage everyone to do the same, go out and talk to people, start from somewhere. I think you won't regret it.
That's a great piece of advice, Joyce. Perhaps Michelle, you would like to chime in next?
Yeah, so mine is not necessarily about career, but basically one thing that has always helped me throughout any sort of period of indecision in my life, or I don't know, maybe I'm having a bad day or anything that happens to me, I always think that it's super important that as women, we find a friend, we find another female that is in a related or some sort of field. It even could be engineering, because I know it's hard to find other women that you really get along with and you really vibe with, and you create a little, I don't want to say girl gang, but basically you create a little group of friends where you guys can talk about your problems, your issues, and have it be really inspiring. It's really inspiring sometimes when groups of women are able to get together and support each other. And I think that if I had that, I really wish I had that in my undergraduate and sometimes during my PhD studies as well. And now that I have it, I think that it would be really hard to go to life without having that support group of other females in science.
Kelsey, we don't see you, but would you like to share your thoughts? Offer a piece of advice? Is Kelsey connected?
I think she got disconnected.
Okay.
So we can check in with her when she comes back.
Okay. Yeah. So now would be a really good time for the audience to ask questions to our panelists. So if anybody has any questions, any thoughts that they would like to discuss with our panelists, please just raise your hand. Meanwhile, I see that Kelsey is back, so maybe she can offer her perspective and advice.
I'm really sorry about that. My computer just kind of conked out, but I'm back now. Sorry. So the question, was what piece of advice you would give to someone? Yes. Similar to Michelle's answer, don't be isolated from other people, just in general. Yeah, it's great to have your friend of similar people, and especially as women in physics, it's good to be with other women in physics, obviously, because there aren't always that many of us. So definitely find your people. Also, just peers, professors you can talk to. Just find people who you can talk to and stay with them, and know who your mentors are, and get support from them if you need them. And other piece of advice is don't feel like you have to stick with something just because you've been doing it for a while. I think I fell into that trap a little bit my last year in industry, where I kind of said, hey, I've been doing this for a while, and if I stick with it, I'll probably be okay. But I didn't really consider that if I change, then things could be even better, and maybe I'll realize that I stayed in industry for too long and that I really should be in academia. So don't do things just because you think you're supposed to. Do things because you think you want to. That's really important. Yeah.
Okay. As Toyoko said, please feel free to enter your questions in the chat, or you can raise your hands. But meanwhile, maybe I can ask one question that I have, perhaps to Joyce first. So do you think that it becomes easier or harder to switch to industry after your undergrad degree or after your PhD, for example? Do you think that there is like a specific milestone in your career path which makes it easier or harder for you to switch to industry from academia?
I think the answer is depends on what you want to do. When I look back in my finished undergrad, I have a lot of classmates who directly go into industry and go into a lot of different fields like marketing, PR. So their opportunities is much broader. The choices is much broader because for those positions where they actually don't require a very deep specialty, then it's a lot of choices out there. However, it doesn't say like after you did a PhD or postdoc, your choices will be very limited. You enter into a different pool. For example, I know in data science field, in my company, we only hire PhD or postdocs because what we're looking for the skill set is independent problem solving and a strong quantitative background. So I would say different education, different background, there is a different pool of jobs for everyone. Even for people who has been pursuing academia for a very long time. My colleagues, I have a lot of colleagues who have been doing like a couple of postdocs already and decided to go to data science after that. So there's definitely possibility for all kind of portfolios.
Okay, looks like we have our first question. Maybe Sarita, you can take this one since you touched upon the subject a little bit. So the question is, what is the problem with being overqualified for industry jobs, and does it increase your probability of not getting selected?
Yeah.
Sorry. Go ahead.
Okay. Yes, I can only speak to my experience here, but so like I specifically went into consumer goods and product development. And so my physics background didn't technically translate directly over to the work that I'm doing. I'm actually a little bit more closely related to my master's, which is in engineering management. But I have found just going for some of those entry-level positions, associate product manager roles, Oftentimes physics was looked at as being overqualified just because you have a lot of quantitative background, and just these skill sets that maybe are used better elsewhere, or in like maybe higher ranking jobs. So just for me specifically, I actually aligned a lot more with my master's degree. I think for PhD specifically, I think is the main issue that if you're switching from academia into industry, sometimes for those entry-level jobs that you're applying to, you probably have just too many years under your belt that like you don't technically qualify anymore for those entry-level positions, but you don't have the years of industry experience. I think that's where the problem lies. So definitely it depends on the job. It depends on what exactly that you're switching into. But it always helps just to get to know someone in that field and understand, you know, how could you rearrange your credentials or promote something different of your expertise in order to apply to those jobs.
I see that we had our first raised hand. So Maya, can you try to unmute?
Hi, I turned my video too. There's also another question in the chat. Do you want to do that first? Because they did post it before I raised my hand.
I'm sorry, I missed that. Yeah, we can do that first. So the question is, what was your biggest challenge in undergrad and the workforce? So maybe Kelsey can answer to the undergrad thing because she's the one who's been through it.
Sure.
Latest.
Yeah, I think my biggest challenge in undergrad, it was entirely self-driven. I think I did not manage my time that well, and that was a skill that I learned how to do over the course of my undergrad. And then in industry, I learned how to manage my time better. And now as a grad student, I need to be, every minute counts. I need to be very, very on top of my work and my schedule. So that was that for me. For the workforce, my biggest challenge was not advocating for myself enough. The workforce is very different than college. So in undergrad, there's a lot of structure, there's a lot of classes, and you know what you're supposed to do. In the workforce, you do need to define that for yourself oftentimes. And now that I'm in grad school, I think the way I start is that there's a lot of structure. And I think as I go on, it'll turn more into that kind of industry-esque type position where I will need to decide what I want to do. I will need to decide how I want my project to go and what steps I need to take to do that. Advocating for myself would have been important because when you're in the workforce, you're often, if you just have a bachelor's, you're working for someone else, and that someone else, it depends on who that person is. It can depend on how your manager is, how easy, how good, how productive your work schedule is. And this is why it's always important to make sure you feel happy with the work you're doing. So I think that's my answer.
Michelle, I'm wondering if you can offer your thoughts on this.
So my biggest challenge in undergrad, it's been a hot minute since I was an undergrad. So I will refrain from answering because I don't know. I think I was the perfect undergrad. No, I'm just kidding. So my biggest challenge in the workforce is that you're going to meet a lot of people with a lot of different viewpoints than you. So whenever you come in from, your degree, you're coming in from your PhD, you find people that are very much like-minded from you. And whenever you enter the workforce, you're going to have to work with people that you may not agree with on a lot of the issues. And I think that has always been my biggest challenge because I definitely try to speak up for what I believe is the right thing. But then at the same time, it's like, well, sometimes you just have to let things go. And I think that has been my biggest challenge over the last few years.
Sarita, would you like to offer us your perspective?
Sure. So I think for undergrad, for me, it was just defining the classes that I wanted to take. And I think a big challenge, at least for applied physics versus theoretical physics, was just having those classes offered on a regular schedule. So planning in advance and knowing when things will be offered. I think I would have done a lot of things differently if I had known that certain classes wouldn't actually be offered during my tenure at Northeastern. So just really, really check ahead and make sure that you plan out your full 4 or 5 years and know what you can take and what you can't. And for the workforce, it's just knowing that there's no longer a textbook that you can follow, right? Like there's no longer a lesson plan or a guided way to solve problems, or someone that you can go to solve a problem a specific way. You're out there. Everybody, no one has no idea what they're doing, basically. No one. So Google is your best friend. Just learning on the fly and knowing that no one else around you is any more qualified than you are.
Joyce, what are your thoughts on that?
I can share my biggest challenge at work because undergrad feels a little bit further away. My memory is a little bit vague in there. I agree with Sarita. The biggest shock when I go into workforce is there's no longer a solution that is correct in their workforce. Before in PhD, undergrad, there's always a physics problem. What is the solution of it? What is the steps to solve it? But once you enter in the workforce, how do you write a document? How do you actually go approach this person? How do you even build a model for this specific problem you're going to solve? Nobody has done it. The problem is specific to this company, specific to this period of time. So figuring that out, like you have to take the risk. Hey, this is after my experience, my educational background, this is my suggestion to the company that I think is right, that I think is actually going to make value. Taking that step forward, I think it's initial big shock and big challenge for me. Yeah, undergrad for me, I think it's also a balance where I actually explore a lot of different things in undergrad. So balance my exploration time versus study time, it's a challenge to me.
Those were great answers. Maya, perhaps we can go to your question now.
Thank you. And I know that we're running over, so I'm sorry. I don't mean to keep anyone longer than they're supposed to be here. But I actually think my question is only related to Sarita because I also want to go into product development. And I'm an undergrad right now. I'm looking for my second co-op. Do you think that your master's helped you make that transition? Like, should I be looking into getting a master's right now, or can I get away with just doing undergrad?
I think it depends where in product development you want to be. So if you want to be in more of a management role, I definitely recommend a master's in something like engineering management. I think doing something that's kind of like the MBA for engineers is very valuable. It gives you those sorts of classes that you're not exposed to during a very STEM specific bachelor's. But if you're more interested in the engineering side, maybe the industrial design side, and working like more with engineers and designers, I think you can get away with just your bachelor's. But I would definitely look out for those classes, for those electives that you can take in product development. There are a ton of them at Northeastern. I highly recommend putting your electives towards those types of classes. It'll give you great exposure.
Okay, thank you. Do you mind if I ask, I mean, obviously not right now because I know we're over, like I said before, but do you mind if I ask some more questions about specifically that, just like maybe later?
Yeah, send me a message on LinkedIn.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, that was a great question. So I don't see any more questions and I don't see any more raised hands. In that case, I would again like to thank our panelists. I think thanks to you guys, we had a wonderful discussion, and I hope that the audience was able to take away some few key points that were sort of a common thread in all the advice that you guys gave. Thanks again so much. Thanks to the participants who showed up. I hope that it was a nice and informative discussion for you. So thanks, Sarita, Joyce, Michelle, Kelsey. Oh, I see that there's one raised hand.
Is there the chance to ask the question? I raised the hand.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. This is a question specifically for Michelle. When we are applying for academic jobs, such as a postdoc or a faculty position, as all of you mentioned, it's very important to reach out specifically to the female members of the academic community or other kind of job communities to get more insight into how it is for women, because we are minorities and things don't look the same for other genders. Do you have any advice on how to very effectively connect with women in the sector where I'm applying for academic jobs? It might be the female postdocs in the university where I want to apply, or in general, female postdocs in my field, or overall in physics.
So yeah, I don't know if you've had the opportunity to attend any conferences yet. Are you at the undergrad or PhD level?
I'm a PhD student and I have connected with people in conferences and summer schools, but wondering if there is a more foolproof option than that, like something like a overall platform where you sign up. Like in Facebook, we can connect with people very easily on a social level. And I'm wondering if something, of course, there's Twitter, but if something more effective is out there for connecting, especially amongst female physicists.
Yeah, so luckily, like the community that I'm in physics, magnetism is super great about this. There's at our magnetism conferences, there's normally a women in magnetism session where it's during the conference, it's after dinner, it's you know, wine and cheese, it's very nice, very classy. I'm involved in like the women in physics groups at my institution, and that's nice to meet people that are actually there. But if you're interested in actually branching out to places where you're interested in applying into in terms of, you know, the next postdoc, I highly recommend maybe reaching out to some of the female members. They may not respond because they just don't know you. But at the end of the day, I think it's always worth a shot to reach out, like really get the knowledge about like what is it actually really like there, because there is different challenges everywhere that you work as a female. Like for one of my challenges at one of my last jobs, there was no women's bathroom on the floor that I worked on. And so I had to walk up 2 flights of stairs. Not like saying I wouldn't have taken the job, but it just would have been nice before the interview to know that I should wear more comfortable shoes, things like that. But essentially, yeah, so I'm involved in like the Women in Magnetism group at the DC level because I live right near DC, and there's a few meetups. It's almost like every 3 or 4 months normally. And even if there is a group, there's normally like a local group for your research field, especially in Boston. Even just going to those events and finding another female there. Sometimes that is the most effective way to meet other females, because sometimes there is just someone saying something totally ridiculous and you just have to talk to like someone else about it, and then you can like be like, oh wow, that was ridiculous together. So essentially just finding out where your field is, and then from there you might have to even start your own groups. Like me and my friends, we started the DC area one women in physics or women in magnetism group specifically, just because there were so many of us at all these women at all the magnetism events. And it's just nice sometimes to get together and talk to each other about the pain points in your field.
Makes sense. Yeah. Thank you so much. Is there time for another follow-up question?
I mean, I have time. So.
Thank you. Do you have any advice on how to spot out potential research groups where I might be very interested to join, but it might be a very toxic environment for female physicists or totally misogynistic? Or probably other ways to call it out.
Like before you even joined the group?
Yeah.
So that I'm less experienced in, just because like whenever I met my PhD advisor, like I knew he was probably one of the most chill and nicest men on the planet, because he just gives off that vibe. And I talked to the other PhD student whenever I was joining, and he was an amazing person as well. So it's kind of hard, but I say like just go with your gut as you're meeting with people, because your gut never really lies. about that. And yeah, Joyce just said join their group meeting. Definitely try that out. Just make sure that there is no like talking down on all the different stuff that you might experience as a female, because if it happens to males, it could happen to you, and then it feels a lot different sometimes if you're the only female there.
Yeah, I went through this process actually kind of recently, but it is the norm. And if they don't do this, that's kind of, I would consider that to be a red flag. But as you're kind of interviewing for groups after you get into a school, or even before then, you should email professors, and they should let you talk to their students without them present. If they don't do that, that's a red flag. And the advisor I have right now, she let me talk to both her students, and she was like, you may talk to them about anything. And I was like, oh, you're so confident that your students are happy that I have a lot of faith in you right now. And it obviously has worked out really well. I think she's amazing. So yes, you should talk to students who have worked for them in the past, and also students who work for them at the time, because people do change over time. Some people chill out. I know some professors have a reputation that has followed them, even though they're not like that anymore. But yeah, talk to students, trust your gut. I agree with everything that's been said. Yeah.
Thank you so much. This is really helpful. I appreciate it.
Yes, thank you for your question. And I would just like to thank the panelists again for their time. Thank you for making the time to speak with all the students and for offering us your advice.
Thank you, everyone. And thank you especially to Tanvi for organizing our discussion and being an excellent moderator for this evening. Thank you all. And I hope that we can all stay connected via LinkedIn, etc. And also hopefully we'll plan some more Women in Physics meetups soon. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.